Okay guys, this video is brought to us by SSP Studios and Gallery. Do me a favor, go over there and give them a like and subscribe and let them know that News Now Alaska sent you over there. This video is about corruption. This video is about Alaska Grand Jurors Association exposing the corruption in the judicial system in Alaska. Do me a favor guys, like, share, subscribe, and here's the video.
Alaska, do we have a corrupt judicial system? Today, that question is being asked by many. We're going to take a dive into the system with hopes to find the answers. One must remember that a person is innocent until proven guilty. That is, unless the system itself is plagued with corruption. In July of 2022, a Kenai grand jury started investigating evidence of systemic corruption within Alaska's judicial system. Of particular concern is Marla Greenstein. For the last 35 years, she is the sole investigator for complaints lodged against judges in the entire state. With over 8,000 investigations, evidence indicates she was falsifying official investigations and certified documents to keep corrupt judges on the bench. You can see evidence against Ms. Greenstein and other documents cited at alaskastateofcorruption.com and alaskagrandjurorsassociation.org. Immediately after the Kenai grand jury subpoenaed Ms. Greenstein, the Alaska Supreme Court issued Order SCO 1993 that changed Criminal Rule 6.1 to further suspend the grand jury powers to investigate, subpoena, recommend, or indict corrupt officials. Yet, in Article 1, Section 8 of the Alaska State Constitution, it states, "The power of grand juries to investigate and make recommendations concerning the public welfare or safety shall never be suspended." Now that we know what the problem is, let's take a step back into time and see what the catalyst was that started all of this.
I'm Todd Lindley, and I'm a member of the Alaska Grand Jurors Association. This is a topic that should be of concern to every single citizen in the state of Alaska that no one is talking about. The only reason why I found out about this particular event that was occurring was through one of the newspapers. The Watchman at the time had run an article about this judicial corruption investigation.
In 2010, evidence cropped up that Alaska's only investigator of judges for the last 35 years was falsifying investigations of judges so that they could remain on the bench. We filed complaints with all the appropriate authorities, with the Department of Law, Commission on Judicial Conduct, Ombudsman, any entity, including the legislature and governor, that we thought could help.
Knowing that there were many families in Alaska that were finding similar problems in Alaska's court systems.
So on the back of this, what judge signed that?
You were here earlier, right? Yeah. I can't read their writing, but
Exactly.
it's presiding judges.
It's supposed to be printed. You've looked at enough of these, you know. That's supposed to have the judge's name printed next to it and then his signature. That's an illegal document. That's not legal. You guys are actually trying to enforce that? I mean, come on.
I kind of joined in with the group and began investigating all different sorts of avenues here.
I'm here because the Alaska Grand Jurors have the right to investigate under the Alaska State Constitution. And it would seem that people are trying to prevent those investigations because there seems to be something to hide. Why else would you stop an investigation? Why would you hinder the right of the people to have a checks and balance on the judicial system or the legislative process or anything? When you go to hide something, it's because there's something to hide. If there's nothing to hide, you open up the investigation.
And what we've seen over the last couple years anyway, since this has been going on and being reported on, especially through the Alaska Grand Jurors Association, is there is a very good reason to believe that we have a lot of corruption that has gone uninvestigated or covered up that needs to be corrected. Because if a citizen can't go into a court of law and know that they're going to get a fair judgment from a judge, then what are we doing here, right? I mean, this is a bedrock of the Republican form of government that we have in the United States, as well as what we have in the state of Alaska.
We tried to present the evidence to the grand jury, and we were blocked by government officials from doing so. And so we started protesting out in front of courthouses to try to get the evidence to grand juries. We would hand out flyers and the evidence. That resulted in a series of 6 grand juries starting to investigate. And all of those grand juries were ordered to stop investigating by judges and district attorneys, and primarily our Deputy Attorney General, John Skidmore.
Investigating judicial corruption should be front page news of every single newspaper in this state. Why it's not? Anybody's guess. Kenai grand jury was actually a majority vote that was put forward by the citizens to impanel a grand jury to investigate judicial corruption. One of the cases that's been involved, certainly David Haig has been quite instrumental in uncovering a lot of the corruption that he's observed and investigated on his own, and morphs into what we're seeing today, especially as the ongoing trials, I should say, for former Judge Margaret Murphy is involved in this corruption case here.
When looking back through the history of the grand juries here in Alaska, it's clear to us that the state has manipulated language in our grand jury handbook and policies that the Supreme Court has created, that they have taken the citizens' rights away to the grand juries here.
Okay, this is scary stuff, guys. This affects every single resident in Alaska. Pay very close attention.
Now, why is suspending a grand jury important? Well, one, our Constitution says that a grand jury shall never be suspended. So, full stop right there. No one has the authority to suspend a grand jury, especially if it's a grand jury that is investigating matters of public safety. And in this instance, we're talking about judicial corruption. So the system by which we are meant to get fair judgment is now under investigation for corruption, but the judge that oversaw this shut down, suspended this, and now the citizen is left with more questions than answers.
We continued to protest, and a 7th grand jury started investigating the evidence and was ordered to stop by Judge Jennifer Wells at the Kenai Courthouse. She not only ordered the grand jury to stop, but she disbanded them permanently. And because of that, the citizens organized a statewide courthouse sit-in to continue even after people were arrested and taken to jail.
Arrested, not surprised.
Until this Kenai grand jury was reconvened and could finish their investigation.
June 2022, the grand jury was impaneled for the purposes of investigating judicial corruption. This was looking at how complaints that were filed against judges or other officers of the court were managed and handled and investigated, in particular with one individual. Her name is Marla Greenstein, and she is I believe she's the executive chair of the Alaska Commission on Judicial Conduct. So she is responsible for investigating complaints that come in when there may be corruption or any kind of other impropriety that may have occurred in the courtroom.
This Kenai grand jury started investigated for about a year. They subpoenaed Marla Greenstein and at least one of the judges that was implicated. And immediately upon them being subpoenaed, the Alaska Supreme Court issued a rule change to suspend the power of grand juries to investigate, report, and indict officials like Ms. Greenstein and the judge.
Now, after this, the Supreme Court had put forth a letter to the AG, so Attorney General Treg Taylor. It was issued by the Chief Justice, and they indicated that they were going to review and make changes to the Criminal Rules Committee, saying how they were going to handle the investigation and the reporting of the grand jury. This is significant because at this time, this occurred about mid-August of 2022. This was after the grand jury had been suspended.
Citizens found out that the Supreme Court had bypassed the oversight of their own Rules Committee to make this change in the rules to suspend the power of grand juries to investigate. By bypassing their own Rules Committee, the Alaska Supreme Court issued SCO 1993 to further restrict the Kenai grand jury of their power to investigate, recommend, and indict public officials.
Instead, the government has adopted a policy of not wanting transparency, and they are blocking grand juries from looking into things.
So if we go back to the Constitution where it says a grand jury shall never be suspended, we have a suspended grand jury, then we have a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court speaking to the Attorney General of the state of Alaska that they're going to review this and make recommendations, but it never actually made it into committee. It was passed before the committee could review it. So this brings us to SCO 1993, which is the subject of many of the protests that have happened, but is now creating a lot of conflict.
In April of 2023, the grand jury indicted Judge Margaret Murphy on felony perjury charges, and they also issued a recommendation and report to inform the Alaska public of what they found in their nearly 2-year investigation. It is over 9 months later, and the Alaskan public still has not seen what this grand jury report has said.
Why is the grand juror's report from this summer not been released? I'd like to know. Because a court case doesn't just happen to one person. It happens as a repetitive history of that judge's either equal application of the law, which is rare, or unequal. And people need to pay attention to who is on the bench.
So it would beg the question, why would the Supreme Court change the rules for how a grand jury conducts investigations and issues reports after the grand jury has already been suspended for the purpose of investigating judicial corruption?
Because of all these problems and the suspension of grand jury power, Alaska Grand Jurors Association was formed to try to restore the ability of grand juries to investigate and recommend wrongdoing by public officials.
Our constitutional delegation, in opposition, they agreed that grand juries have the power to investigate and address corruption in government, free from any interference. The power of grand juries to inquire into the willful misconduct in office of public officers and to find indictments in connection therewith shall never be suspended. December 15th, 1955.
When the Alaska Supreme Court first tried to suspend grand jury power, it was by the narrow margin of 3 justices to 2. The 2 justices that said grand jury power could not be suspended issued this statement. Webster's Third New International Dictionary's first definition of never is not ever, not at any time, at no time. Its second is not in any degree, not in the least, not in any way, not under any condition. Its first definition of suspend is to debar or cause to withdraw temporarily from any privilege, office, or function.
However, the longer this continues to drag on, it should require or the citizens should be asking of themselves why, especially because the charges that former Judge Margaret Murphy is facing are those of perjury. And for those that may not know what perjury is, it's lying under oath. So this is what brings us to where we're at today. And that's significant, right? Is every citizen that walks into the court of law is required to put their hand on the Bible and say that they swear to tell the whole truth. So why should we think and let a judge act any differently?
They are what is making the laws, the application of the laws within the judicial system problematic. It's not being applied equally to all. people can go to jail for 2 years for killing a baby, but then they're getting 50 years for protesting like this, or they're getting tased for speaking up for their rights. And it's time for the grand jurors to really take a hard look at what is going on within the judicial system.
A grand jury has the ability to look into why we are not getting our full PFD. A grand jury would have the ability to find out why the Capitol was not moved when it was voted on. The grand jury can look into virtually anything, and that would allow us to get control back of our government.
Well, as we've covered a lot of ground today, talking about the history, talking about the background, what's been going on now, how it relates to the history of the Constitution, and just how it impacts the citizen, I think it's important that we give you the ability to get involved. And I say that because we need the public to know about this. This is an incredibly important issue, and it's one that we need more people to ask more questions. And it doesn't have to be anything too grand. You don't have to stand out on the street corner and hold a sign, although we have plenty of signs and we'd be happy to give you one. And we'd welcome anybody to join with us, no matter if it's here in Anchorage, Fairbanks, Kenai, Juneau, all around the state. I mean, it does not matter. This is an Alaskan issue. The other thing that you can do is on the website, alaskagrandjurorsassociation.org, there's a lot of background history. I mean, there is so much information there, but not to overwhelm you. There's some good summaries that have been put together that give you a brief history of what you need to know today, the history of the changes that occurred that are related to SCO 1993, and there's a contact page. And on the other end of that contact is a person, whether that's David Haig, Sarah Short, myself. There are people there that share the same passion as you, and we would love to have you join us so that way you can be a courageous voice in your community to stand up for the rights of all Alaskans and to root out corruption no matter where it is, but especially in the judicial system.
Okay, guys, do me a favor. Go to alaskastateofcorruption.com. Check it out. Like he just said, there's a lot of information on there. And I mean a lot. If you want to know more about this, that's the place to go. You can also go to alaskagrandjurorsassociation.org. They got quite a bit of information on there. This is really important, everybody. We need to let everybody know about this. Share this with everybody you know, friends, family, coworkers. I appreciate each and every one of you for joining me. Thanks for watching. Check this guy out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.
This issue is an Alaskan issue. This does not matter if you're Republican, Democrat, conservative, whatever. This affects all of us. This is something that our children are going to be subject to. This is something that all of us may come to face at some point in our life of whether or not we are going to get a fair trial in a courtroom where a judge may be corrupt. So we ask you to join us. Come and visit the alaskagrandjurorsassociation.org. Send us a message, join a protest, share this with your friends. Thank you.